I was introduced to Lancer, a mech-based TTRPG by the DM. I came up with a character who would prioritize survival over all other engineering considerations. The metal mark seemed like a good option, combined with specializations in infiltration. In D&D terms, think of a rogue build for capitalizing on distractions. The DM seemed frustrated with how effective the invisibility effects I was getting were. I should be clear that I was a complete beginner to the system, and even if I wanted to break the game, I wouldn't know how. I pointed the DM towards actions meant to counter stealth effects, but after getting some bad rolls and some unrelated frustrations, he canceled the session early. The next morning, I see a message in the group chat about how every action, specialization, and effect related to my class was completely banned going forward. The mech I chose, the skills I chose, even the ability to hide at all were to be permanently and immediately excluded from the game. I left the group after that. I tend to avoid nerfing and banning things unless it just doesn't narratively fit into my setting. And while I haven't watched enough Neon Genesis Evangelion to justify running a Lancer game myself, without it feeling like mecha anime stolen valor, I think the removal of an entire class and playstyle is a huge overreaction. This game master must have looked at the past few updates for Helldivers 2 and thought, man, I can nerf the fun out of a game way better than these guys. So while he may not be cut out for running a game of Lancer, I hear there are some job openings at Arrowhead Game Studios. But that's the story, those are my thoughts, and my name is Jacob Crowe, and welcome to the Crowe's Perch, where each week I send illegally obtained copies of the D&D 2024 rulebook to random viewers in the hopes of my house being invaded by a Pinkerton death squad. That way I can test out the thermite charges I planted on my walls. But you didn't come here to listen to me rant about my burgeoning criminal enterprise. You came for RPG stories, and I have them. But before we gather up a murder and dive into this next story, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Into the AM. If you're like me and you're terrible at finding new graphic tees to wear, so you end up wearing a Hawaiian shirt in Indianapolis when you go to Gen Con, then you're going to love Into the AM. And lucky for you, some of their most beloved button-ups, vintage, and graphic tees are back. I personally decided to grab the Neon Shores and Abyss tees, and I also decided to snag one of their Infinity Explorer tees, because I mean, just look at this design. So if you yourself would like to check them out and expand your wardrobe beyond the single t-shirt you wear with the anime girl doing an ahegao face that caused your parents to stop inviting you for Christmas parties, you can use my promo code CROWESPERCH, that's CROWESPERCH, or you can follow the pinned link in the comment section to snag a 10% off coupon at checkout. Thank you once again to Into the AM for sponsoring this video. And so without further ado, let's gather up a murder and dive into this next story. Hey y'all, thought I'd share this, as it's something my friends and I have turned into an inside joke and meme. This is a short and much more lighthearted tale. It's from a Pathfinder 1st Edition game I had since left, and happened about a year ago. I'm playing a kobold alchemist who is the party's skill monkey, scout, and effective rogue. We're in a dungeon, and in this dungeon, and the previous one, the DM kept having us run into stuck doors we could only bash down with strength checks. Eventually the DM gets the hint we don't like wasting time on doors that have only one solution. So he begins to introduce locked doors. However, despite my character having locksmith, i.e. thieves' tools, made for them very early on in the campaign, I try to open a door and roll a nat 20, 27 on my disabled device check, and am told the door wasn't unlocked. Now at the time, I didn't know that skill checks are not auto successes if you nat 20, but this wasn't like the door to the King's Royal Chamber that would warrant such a high DC. These were old, decrepit, rotten wooden doors in a 1,000-plus-year-old tomb of a precursor race. And what's worse is that after I fail the check, the fighter walks up and bashes the door down on his first try. Needless to say, the whole party lambasted the DM over this, as it clearly was BS, to which the DM replied, "Sorry, I thought there wasn't a rogue in the party, so the DC didn't need to be passable." Yeah, he completely forgot I had locksmith tools made early in the campaign, so I could do rogue stuff. Anyways, later doors had fair DCs, and we stopped running into so many stuck doors as well. This one encounter has left me with an annoying yet funny story that I like to meme around with. If it's not my inability to pick an old lock, it's a joke about how many stuck doors we think a dungeon will have. Also, why didn't they let these players use grease? You know how useful grease is? Whenever I play a dungeon crawl nowadays, I slap that shit on everything. Door hinges, arrows, deaf guys in their underwear. So many players sleeping on grease. And slipping, too. It's pretty good for that. But look, there are very few situations in which your players are going to feel really jazzed about being given the ability to make a skill check, only for it to literally mean nothing for the game. It sucks as a player because it makes you feel like you don't have any agency, and that in turn sucks for the GM, because then the players are going to be less interested in being proactive. That's why, as I've said countless times in this channel, just don't let them roll if it's impossible. But to expand on this, don't make something impossible if narratively it is very possible. My suspension of disbelief is going to just fly out the window if you tell me that the impenetrable defense, keeping all would-be lockpickers at bay, is a goddamn master lock. And so, by the decree of the Corvid Court, I hereby sentence this DM to a Saw-style trap where they must use nothing but a D20 in order to escape from a series of locked doors.
Hello, Dungeon Master. I'd like to play a game. And no, it's not Pathfinder. You forced your friends to roll the dice. Now, it's your turn to roll. Live or die, make your dexterity saving throw. Kaboom!
Alright. So this happened a few years back, but I was in a college tabletop group. There was one particular DM who ran games for most of the group, who we'll call George for this story. Anyways, I'm preparing for my first game with him, rolling character stats, figuring out my backstory, stuff like that. According to George, I'd be jumping in to replace another player who'd been team killed for being a constant thorn in the side of other players. These players would be going to the Kenku Republic, or as George described it, Bird Russia, where my new character would be introduced. So I go Aarakocra Artificer, and talked at length with the DM about how my character could own a gun store, and how we could work with the ruling government. Well, come my first game, and I'm told by George to wait, while he gets everything ready for my character introduction. The party enters the main palace and meet the ruler, who offers them an assistant on the quest they're about to take for him. Instead of the introduction George and I had worked out, my character was dragged out in front of the other party members, feathers torn out and severely malnourished, with his legs and arms bound. This was not at all what we'd agreed upon. George, however, decided to not tell me that Aarakocra were second-class citizens, and that the ruler had taken my character for his own personal uses. Not a great start. The game continues, my new party taking my character and leaving the palace. They decide to stop in town to shop and restock, when out of nowhere, we are all asked to roll saves. Apparently, the Aarakocra Rebellion decided that they were going to have a magically enforced march in the capital city, and you never guess who auto-failed the saving throw. Oh, and don't worry about if my character was seen or not, as a photograph was taken, with my character front and center. So now my character is being hunted by the law enforcement, the party appropriately reacting with grabbing my character and running like hell out of the city. The party, however, decides to continue with the mission, finding the Rebel HQ, easily findable in the woods, next to the capital, of course. As we travel through the woods, we're attacked, and I'm told by the party to hang back and hide, as my character is still weak from being, imprisoned. Well, George springs a new and awesome, his words, mechanic, where whenever a party member is in an enclosed space, they need to roll a Constitution saving throw. My weakest stat. I fail. And George tells me,
your character has been teleported into a pocket dimension, where he is tormented by his worst nightmares and memories. He cannot escape unless someone else lets him out.
I didn't return for a session 2. Yeah, that sounds like it's for the best. This DM's about to make a name for himself here, as probably one of the worst I've seen in a very long time. And it quickly became even more concerning to me when I popped open the comment section only to find out that the DM had planned on making this a podcast to be posted onto YouTube. And in my humble opinion, maybe recreating Adam Koebel's final episode of Far Verona every session isn't the greatest plan when trying to start out your new live D&D show. I don't know. Food for thought. Anyway, our last 2 stories today are submitted by user Artmonso in the Crowe Discord, who hasn't had the greatest luck with their games lately. With this next one being so bad, I'm going to have a content warning for body horror, unwanted sexual attention, and assault. And so, without further ado, let's keep the murder rolling as we dive into this next Story. Hello, Internet. I'd like to share another of my years of horrible RPG experiences. Today I would like to talk about Jones. Until he wasn't. If he ever was that great to begin with. He had a great understanding of the rules of any game he ran, be it roleplay focused or combat. An English doctorate whose use of words and descriptions makes theater of the mind like listening to radio play, and would work with you. Character backgrounds would work with you to make the best character you want, mechanical and roleplay wise, complete with integrated questlines that sometimes interlock with other PC's backgrounds, and the main plot. He was great until his mother started to show signs of cancer, and had some inner demons that none of us knew about. Or, at the very least, I started to see come out. This was one of the games that it really started to show. He invited me and 3 others. I think 2 of them were Group Dad and Kevin from this story. Wait, are these recurring characters? I didn't realize it before, but apparently Art Monceau has an entire horror story cinematic universe worth of characters. So maybe one day I'll chase down an origin story of these guys in another video. So for now, let's just skip past them. Just like I did with Ant-Man, Thor the Dark World, or that one Marvel TV show that came out like a year or 2 ago that everyone hated. And the best part about me saying that is you have no idea whether I'm talking about She-Hulk, Secret Invasion, or that other Ant-Man movie that you totally forgot was a movie and not a series that you only really remember because they made MODOK look like Joe Rogan after he and his rock-hard nipples were found frozen to death in his ice bath. And then he went ahead and had his brain transferred into one of those skibbity toilet TV heads. Feels really poignant bringing this up considering his Netflix special he apparently spent 6 years fine-tuning is doing about as well as all 3 of the shows I just mentioned. Wait, is one of them a movie? Anyway, back to the story. This was before COVID-19, so there was no Roll20, I believe. He had scrapped together a mix of Skype for voice, a browser host for dice rolls, and an old-looking open-source map program. And all 3 programs didn't play well. The game plot was that a mysterious portal opened up in a swamp outside a small trade port. The portal is on the same plane as the world. In fact, it seems to be leading to the new world, which no one seems to be able to get to by boat, as the coastline seemed guarded by some spell that destroyed any boat or airship that tried to land. Our mission was to go through the one-way portal, meet up with the Spearhead Camp, scout out the land, and find a way to break through the ward from the inside out, or make a 2-way portal. I was told up front that this was a more lethal than normal roguelike campaign. One player had asked, and the GM confirmed. We rolled up homebrews on heavily homebrewed D&D essentials, and headed into the portal. I figured the GM would be pretty fair on player character deaths, based on most of his other games. So I figured as long as you're not doing anything blatantly stupid, you're good. The first character I roll up was a lizard folk fighter, a chieftain's son from a local tribe, rolling pretty well on stats. The party, I believe was a cleric, rogue, and bard, went through and was in the middle of the base camp, where a pack of hyenas had decimated the forward camp, eating the remains of researchers before laughing at the new players. We kill the hyenas pretty quickly, with me tanking most of the hits, and everyone else either played support or heavy hitters. We searched the camp and found some clues and some points of interest. We decided to try making it to a large cliff face nearby, as we have salvaged some survey gear. On the way, we saw a large pride of dire lions. We were talking about what to do about them, when the internet crapped out. I tried to reset my computer, and my dad tried to reset the router, and couldn't get back online. I called the DM Joe this, and he told me it was okay, and he would see me next game. I was then told to make a new character, as my character had been molted to death by the lions. He had sacrificed himself to try to keep the others alive, so my character and wizard died, but at least the others could complete the survey. Plus, everyone who survived leveled. So we were level 2 now. We would make characters to the surviving player's level at least. My second character was a human ranger, a war vet who lived through a lot of crap, and was paranoid about everything, with the wizard having switched to a knight. We choose to avoid most encounters, but after running into what looked like cultists trying to sacrifice a friendly native, we acted. The native takes us back to their village. The chief was thankful that we saved his daughter, but pissed off the gods, the cravers of flesh, and needed to do a rite of peace and forgiveness. Me and the group started to ask what that entails when the internet crapped out again. The router died, and I needed a new one. I let the DM know what happened, and Joe said he understood and would play my character. Come session 3, and I found out my character willingly volunteered to take place in the rite, which involved his dismemberment and being boiled in a pot with all of their, and I quote, non-sexual bodily fluids along with the woman we saved. The village's gods said they could never forgive them for meeting with flesh so sour and tainted, and the whole village needed to be cleansed. So the village started to mutate into flesh golems, a la Cronenberg. The village of flesh monsters quickly killed the rogue and knight, leaving the bard alive as he tripped the rogue while fleeing. So, character 3. My last one before I dropped was a half-elf human wizard, a headstrong workaholic trying to prove herself to her academy, also coming in at level 4 at this point, and sharing starting gold with the knight, now druid and rogue, into a rogue and wizard. The 3 characters going to the same school to justify to the DM the way we got our ascending stones, along with our starting gold. We get to the camp to meet up with Bard, who is copying his notes of what we have seen so far, and reports of how flocked everything was. The ascending stones did not work in the camp because of magical interference, and we would need to find a place with a clearer aura than the camp. One of the spots uncovered by the villager post-Flesh Monster was a tower of forsaken magics, and the Flesh Monster worshippers hate the place, so it must have something useful or clear of interference. So we go to the tower, sneak through the place, trying to attack from surprise as much as possible, any cultists or flesh-mutated animals that beat us to the tower. We made it to the top of the tower, and found we could set up the stones to start communicating with the camp back home. While the towers were tuning, we found an idol in the tower's center. It sent out strong magical vibes and was shaped like a woman deep in self-gratification. Joe was a sex-positive person and had adult themes in all his games, so I did some checks and found it was likely cursed. I pointed the curse idol out when I disconnected again. So I get my laptop out, moved closer to the Wi-Fi spot, and walked into my character's death. Joe was describing his homebrew cursed magic item, and a Lovecraftian body horror shift for whoever would touch it. So I walked into the game where my character, not 5 minutes, had explained why touching the curse idol was a bad idea, and in the same breath had ran up and shoved the whole thing up her rear end. The idol was fusing with her body, violently twisting her into the shape of a magic rod, made worse by the magic of the Sending Stone getting drained to feed its power, making them useless. It also destroyed the copied notes we were trying to send back. The sorcerer, bard, and rogue wizard were trying not to get sucked into the magic vortex around my character. I asked what the fuck was going on. Yeah, I'd like to ask the same thing, bud. I think just about everybody listening wants to ask this question. As I was only disconnected for 5 minutes, Joe explained that he assumed that I was going to be gone for the rest of the session. So he rolled on the inner darkness table to see how terrible my character would behave without the better nature of the player there. He rolls for a descriptor and sin. That was the goal of the character to complete, even if it kills them. So when I logged off, he rolled repressed lust for my character, so he had her pleasure herself with the idol. I protested the roll as I wasn't gone for that long, and it seemed very irrational for my character to warn the party 1 minute and fall for the trap the next. DM tells me he feels like a workaholic mage would be sexually repressed and stubborn enough to do so. I started looking for a spell to counter the effect, but DM told me it was willing on my part, so I can't stop it. I asked him if I could stop the Sending Stones from burning out, and he replied,
"As you look to the sorcerer and rogue wizard, you feel the need to draw the pair into yourself, as the refinding of your very soul feels so damn good."
So the 3 of us are turned into a powerful magical rod, fusing all of our powers and adding some charm spells. The rod being decorated with the 3 of us passionately hugging each other. I was pretty pissed at this point about the inner darkness roll, and asked why this wasn't talked about before. The DM Joe wanted mechanics to be revealed as a surprise as we played the game. My last 2 characters, who died, rolled on the inner darkness rolls, as the lizard folk rolled a rageful pride and provoked the lions, and the ranger rolled a gullible inferences, so he hopped into the cooking pot without a second thought. At this point, I just made up an excuse not to play, and left the game. I later talked to the bard player Kevin about what happened next, months later. He told me that Joe felt like I was disconnecting on purpose, regardless of my shitty internet, as
He could have got to a cafe or library.
So there wasn't any real excuse, other than his games aren't normally ones you play in public spaces. Plus, I didn't really have my own laptop. The inner darkness chart was intended to be used for the game, but he also may have fudged my rolls a bit. The game, I was later told, ended up being slung. Every clue was destroyed before they even got there, and trying to keep the research up and documented was fruitless, as it ended up getting destroyed. Every session, someone dies by flesh monster save or die checks, and some sessions are near TPKs. It all came to a head as the bard waited for the others to make characters, after another near TPK where his PC disconnected as the power unit failed. Joe was waiting with Bard by this point, so he just walked down to let the DM know what happened. Joe started to laugh manically as he started to roll on the inner darkness table. The bard got something along the lines of gluttonous manic envy, and started to eat all of the cursed tomes the party could acquire. As the bard ate it all, remembering you shouldn't eat anything raw, throws himself onto the fire to bake the food he just ate. The mix of fire, cursed books, and his belly juices transformed the man into a gluttonous flesh demon. The other players were allowed to at least join as the characters they made, but if no one survived what was dwelling at camp, then the starting level will be reset to 1. Everyone entered, and the beast that was the bard slaughtered most of them in a couple of rounds, with save or die multi-attacks. Joe ended the session there, and asked everyone to make new level 1 characters. The players asked if the bard monster will still be there, and Joe laughed and shouted,
Hell fucking yeah, easy food is there.
Everyone just walked at this point. I got a group email for the campaign's epilogue, describing how the barrier fell, and how the flesh monsters flooded the world, taking only hours to consume the world. The last holdout spent their final hour carving out stones. Stones that cursed out the player characters that entered the portal, for not caring what happened to the world, despite the world giving them everything. TLDR. DM invites me and 3 others to a roguelite D&D game involving insta-death flesh monsters. Last 3 sessions as every time, my character died, because my computer sucked at running programs needed to play, and DM takes it personally due to declining mental health. At first, I thought the reason Joe all but forced the players to revert to level 1 was to give them a hard reset, because he felt like he completely fucked up his campaign and didn't or couldn't think of a way he could communicate that with his players. But after the weird laughing at them and leaving a high-level enemy right where they technically spawn in, like a video game logic episode of Viva La Dirt League, makes me think that he's just a power-hungry prick who shouldn't run D&D games. The game is supposed to be a lot more lethal than normal, apparently according to Joe. And while it's definitely lethal, I guess, the term roguelite is also used, which, for anyone who hasn't watched a video game stream of mine, twitch.tv/Perch, love to see you there. A roguelite is a typically challenging game where you have 1 life to live to discover secrets, unlock powers, and collect weapons as you run through a dungeon. And all of it gets progressively harder as you run towards the inevitable boss at the end, and everything that you got during your run resets the moment your character meets their tragic demise. In a roguelite specifically, you get to keep some stuff to make your next run or your next character's life a little easier, but it's like a puzzle to figure out that's supposed to be really easy to jump in and jump out of, which means you really want to play it with a game that has a lot less character options, unlike with something like D&D 5e, or at least in a system where you could be able to make characters very quickly. That way you don't spend an hour in character creation only to find out that your character won't survive their first encounter. There is a lot of connective tissue with roguelikes and roguelites with older versions of more dungeon crawly D&D, but a big part of the genre is figuring things out. There's tons of lessons to be learned with different enemies, and tons of secrets. But to bring all of this to the DM Joe, I'm not seeing the connection here. Aside from the fact that, once again, it's lethal, I guess. Like, what is the point of this? What lessons is he teaching his players with each new character? That as a DM, he can just take over his players' actions for funsies? That at any point, he can just soft lock the player's ability to progress in the campaign? What does this teach them and condition them towards, aside from the inevitable result of leaving your game because it sucks? No one's gonna put up with that shit. Even games that are hard because they have random bullshit that can just end your run don't have a dungeon master that can just decide he wants to do this on a whim and force one of those results to happen. You can have a table capable of random bullshit. Every DM does, including myself. But that bullshit has to have rules that it must abide by. Otherwise, the only thing difficult about your game will be keeping your players. But that's going to be it for today's stories. And if you enjoyed today's stories and would like to see more of them, then remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel for the latest RPG horror stories. Have your own story to share? Then join the Crow's Perch Discord and chat with fellow burbs about your current games, or even look for a new one to play. Or if you just like the channel and want to throw a couple bucks my way, then check out the Crow's Perch Patreon and join the burb aristocracy. Okay, first things first is an apology. I am so sorry to my patrons. I know I have been uploading lately. My excuse is just that I have been working in management lately. Yes, I know, I've become a member of the bourgeoisie. Yes, I know this is a crime. Yes, you can hang me first. And for those who have stuck around, thank you so much. Pretty much all of your donations are going to go exclusively to my editor, and I plan for some new content that I'm going to be releasing soon. I'm just still working out some details with some other D&D people, so I'm so sorry about that. But expect a video pretty soon that's not going to be like anything else I've uploaded before. Anyway, enough apologies. Thank you to my Council Quills, like Fairy Fire, King Drazil, Christian Pip, Haley Thompson, Zero Fang, and Netscape Navigator. And second, I'd like to thank my Twitch subs and my Barons of Beaks, like Eric DeFox, Spooky, Archangel Nuriko, Keone, Jonathan Fenton, Kieran Slater, Running Bear, Haley McAuliffe, Brittany Mars, Ars Tarak, Kuntos Weasel, Cardispawn, Lord Rend, Den of the Drake, McEatley, Anya, McLeeb, and Auntie Haunty. And next up, I'd like to thank my Dukes of Feathers, like Yuki the Adorburb, Angrad, Grunt, Kivemind, Jarrett Sewer, and Matthew Mulqueeny. Thank you guys so much for sticking around, and I hope to have more stuff for you soon. And with all of that out of the way, I will see you next time as the crow flies.